Well, welcome everyone. Nice to be here in the room with people. And people online didn't hear, but I asked permission to take my mask off here. And Common Ground's in the transition with COVID policy. So we'll probably get an email out to everybody this week or by next week for sure with the new COVID policy being in line with the CDC and Minnesota Department of Health and our doctor advisors. So we'll probably go mask free. I mean, people, of course, can still and should wear masks if you need to, but we won't require masks and a vaccine mandate. But still today, for a few more days at least. So thanks. And it seems kind of appropriate on a beautiful, I mean, we could start to feel the spring here in Minnesota, that we're here to talk about sensuality. And it's really the age-old question, how to be fully human, fully embodied in this relational world. And I think tonight the approach is just to reflect about, what have we learned in the length of our life? What have we learned about being happy in this relational, sensual world? What has worked for us and what hasn't worked for us? And next week we'll have small groups and we'll talk about this in that small group. But before we go any further, there are a few of you who are new to our Buddhist studies classes here at Common Ground Meditation Center. And we often chant the refuges slowly. And in the olden days, when we were mostly in the room together and there were just a handful of people online listening in, it was really nice to sing or chant together in a slow way and harmonize and hear our voices coming together. It's really a wonderful way to feel in community. It's a little different online and in person here, but let's do this. And we chant the three refuges a little bit more slowly than we would if we were doing sort of the traditional recitation. And again, for people who just came online, I'll paste it in the chat so you can chant along with us. And if you're unfamiliar with the three refuges, it's in a way, it's just Buddhist code for our practice. Buddha means to be awake, to be wide open, to be trusting, recognizing and trusting awareness. And Dharma or Dhamma means to be connected with the flow of experience, the reality of what's coming and going, both internally and externally. And we often think of this marriage of Buddha, wakefulness, being intimate with Dhamma the way it is, as a basic instruction for us. How can I be wide open, sensitive, curious with the way it is right now, connected? And then what flows out of that, when we do have those moments of being connected, we find Sangha. Sangha means living out of that place of intimacy and the skillfulness that can flow from that. We use that word Sangha generally to mean spiritual community, but it has this more particular meaning, as if we would catch our friend who was just in a wonderful place, being intimate with the way it is, and we'd say to them, you're Sangha. I'm so happy to be around you because just the way you are right now is so real and so beautiful and so responsive and appropriate and powerful, and it's a sight to behold. And I'm grateful just to be seeing you in that place. And sometimes we're that person, that Sangha, coming out of the depth and breadth of being intimate with the way it is. So let's go ahead and do this together. Buddhaṃ saraṇam Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. So make some adjustments. We'll begin with a guided meditation, and then I'll introduce the course. So much of the time in our life, we're pushed around, the heart, the mind is pushed around by the diversity of our experience, sounds, thoughts, sights, sensations. And with each experience, the thinking mind feels compelled to have an opinion or reaction or to compare it to another similar experience, and on and on. One experience triggering many more. And it's quite agitating for us humans, us sensitive humans, to be in the push and pull of all this sense contact. So one thing we can do as a meditative training is we can train the mind to radically simplify what it's paying attention to. And it isn't about repressing. We don't need to wear earplugs, or we don't need to even close our eyes. We don't have to hold the body still, but these sometimes can be useful just to simplify the experience. But it's more of a mental training where we're training the mind to pay attention to just one thing. And in doing that, it lets go of being sensitive to the diversity of the other experiences that are coming and going. So one of the experiences we use, as many of you know, is mindfulness of breathing, the breathing process. Even after the Buddha's deep awakening, he continued to practice mindfulness of breathing just because it was pleasant and didn't harm anybody, didn't cause any problems. So why not take advantage of this wholesome pleasure, what in Buddhism we call seclusion, We're secluding our mind from the push and pull, the agitating push and pull of sensitivity. So sitting now, aware the whole body sitting, and taking enough time to befriend the body and to learn not to be afraid to feel the whole body, and to invite maybe some softening and natural releasing of unnecessary tension in the body. And we don't need to rush, but when you feel ready, let there be some basic curiosity around the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. And we don't need a particular kind of breath, so just trust your body to do the breathing. That will be fine. And you can just notice where in the body it's easy to feel the breathing in, and where in the body it's easy to feel the sensations of breathing out. And this is really a training in curiosity and attentiveness, learning to be interested and attentive to this one natural process of breathing in and breathing out. And of course, our attention is in the habit of going wherever it wants to go, paying attention to this thought and then this sound. But now we're asking it to notice the sensations of breathing in from the beginning of the in-breath all the way to the end. And then once again, from the beginning of the out-breath all the way to the last bit of the out-breath. So one half breath at a time, relaxed, almost as if this is a fun game, to be tracking the sensations of breathing in, and then to be challenging ourselves to track the sensations of breathing out, and learning how to be intimate without needing to control how the breath comes in and how it goes out. Just let that happen naturally, even if it feels forced. Simply trust the body to breathe. And have a friendly relationship with any distractions that interrupt that continuity of being with the breathing process. And just start again in a relaxed but persistent way, as if this were the most important thing, simply to be intimate with the breathing in and intimate with the breathing out. So we're secluding the mind to just this one process of breathing in and out. And in a simple way, we're exploring temporarily, leaving behind the sensual world, except for the sensuality of breathing in and breathing out. This part of the sensual world we keep in mind, but we let everything else fall away into the background. And we give our whole heart, our whole attentiveness to the sensations of breathing in and breathing out, and the good feeling of that seclusion, the good feeling of the simplicity. So the mind is learning to be content with just this simple sensual experience of breathing in and out. And if any calm, any good feeling arises, then even as you continue to be aware of breathing in and breathing out, be curious about that good feeling that arises with the continuity. And we're just exploring this possibility of temporarily leaving the world behind, except this very simple world of breathing in is like this, breathing out is like this. And to keep the breath in mind doesn't take a tight energy, doesn't take the energy of even focusing. It's more about remembering that this is what the mind is being asked to do. To remember to recognize the breathing in, to remember to recognize the sensation of breathing out. That's the real work. It's very subtle, just remembering to be aware of the breathing in and the breathing out. The effort of not forgetting the breath, keeping it in mind. So for a few more minutes, just doing the best we can. And now for the last few minutes of the set, instead of cultivating seclusion, we'll cultivate an openness. So opening the eyes, seeing is like this. Hearing is like this. And just noticing the diversity of sense experience. Start by just tuning in to each of the 5 physical senses at your own pace. And having a real sense of the diversity of the present moment in terms of sense contact. And they're all our thoughts about our life, about this moment, our duties, responsibilities, our to-do list, our opinions about Buddhist meditation practice. Just trying to have fresh eyes or fresh sensitivity as we recognize, well, this is the world of sensuality. Sense impingement, pleasant, unpleasant, lots of neutral, endlessly coming and going, thoughts, sensations, sights, sounds. So many fears, so many hopes, So many likes and dislikes. And then the last minute or so, let's just check and see if there are any desires, even subtle desires, like I'm noticing the desire to move. And I actually did just move a little. But it's not about judging desires, just wanting to have a clear sense of this natural force of desiring. What to do with this human life. And take a little time, adjust and stretch, whatever you need. Kathleen, would you turn the top two lights maybe about a third of the way up? And you have to click them too, the flap. Yeah, great, thanks. Well, welcome everyone. We have about 10 people in the room and about 90 on Zoom right now. And big welcome to the spring class. It's sort of a shorter Buddhist studies. Often they're 8 weeks, but we have 4 weeks to study sensuality, craving, contentment, and dispassion. And it really goes to the heart of the Buddhist teachings. I think, of course, there have been a lot of wise people through human history, and some of those folks, their teachings have lived on after them, which is great for us. But one of the unique additions from the Buddhist teachings is really around how to relate to sensuality. And one of the central questions that we can explore this week, this first week of the course, is just to observe our own relationship to the world of experience. And I'll just give you some possibilities that might show up. But we often, one common way is we relate to sensuality, to sense experience, as if it's a little bit like the Christian story of the Garden of Eden. Its purpose, the world's purpose, is to create the conditions for me to be happy. It's like the beauty of nature is here for me to enjoy, or the good food, or the good friends, or the nice clothes, and if I'm not enjoying my sense experience, it's like somebody's messing with my paradise, or I got a raw deal. There's lots of nice stuff, but for some reason I didn't get my share. But the general idea is that the point of being embodied, having this opportunity to have sense experience, is really, it's sort of my playground or my working space where I'm collecting nice sense experiences, learning how to collect just the right sense experiences until I'm happy. And I think, that may not ring true to you, but I'm trying to characterize what I think is, for us, I put myself here too, a predominant way that all of us, I don't think it's just Western culture, that all of us relate to sense experience. We're in this sort of agitated struggle to get sense experience to make us happy. I'm a little too cold, I'll go get a sweater. I'm a little too bored, I'll turn on a TV program. I'm a little bored, I'll go eat something. I've eaten too much, I'll take an Alka-Seltzer or a Tums or whatever. And on like that. We're just sort of tweaking with whatever degrees of freedom, whatever power we have to affect the world of sense experience, sensuality. We keep messing with it to try to get it just right. And there's a unspoken assumption behind that, which is when I get it right, I'll be happy. So that the place to become happy is in the world of sense experience and getting it just right. And if when we're unhappy, we think, well, I haven't done my job yet, or somebody's getting in the way of me doing my job of getting the right sense experiences. And then sometimes when, just through fortune or fate or random, whatever the causes are, and we have a string of really difficult experiences in this sense world, then we can have this kind of opposite view where we really think, it's out to get me. and we're sort of looking for the next terrible thing. Bump my head, or step into a cold puddle of water, or get some bad news from a friend, or look at the news and see what's happening in the world, and my heart breaks, and we can almost feel sometimes like it's personal, that the world, sensuality, the difficulty of a sense experience. And remember, sense experience includes the whole relational field, like our hearts breaking because of a difficult relationship. Somebody insults us or abuses us. We can really feel sometimes like the world is out to get me. And I'm just here, like, my relationship to sensuality is to survive with the fewest number of scars, the fewest wounds, just to minimize the damage, right? That's sometimes how it is for us. I'm just trying to keep it from getting worse. And we tend to swing back and forth, when we get a good run of luck, good fortune, then we can switch back to oh yeah, maybe I can make this thing, my life, really work. Just got to tweak it a little bit more. Just got to lock in the good stuff and tease out a few more bad things. And then when we have a run of really difficult, challenging experience, then we can fall into that other point of view where it's sort of thinking the world is out to get me. And in a way, in a stereotypic way, and sort of Buddhism, and especially in sort of the folk religious part of Buddhism, lay existence, those of us who aren't nuns and monks or haven't become monastics, we're sort of, our lives as a layperson is characterized by trying to make life work for us, sense experience work for us, and trying to get some happiness. And the kind of stereotype, or the shadow even, of monasticism is like having given up on sense experience. So I become a celibate, I only wear a few robes, they just have these, they're basically like in the tropics, they're bed sheets dyed using a root. Traditionally they use jackfruit root, I think it's called. and they, boil this root of a plant that has that kind of orangey, reddish color, and they dye their robes, and they're just like sheets, and they have sort of ways to wrap them around their body, and they have a few other possessions traditionally, but not too many things. And they can't store food. They gotta receive food from lay people every day if they're going to eat, because they can't keep things overnight. And basically, you're not really eating past midday. So as soon as you can see the lines in your hand in the morning, you can go walking for alms round. But it has to be light enough that when you extend your arm like this, you get to see the lines in your hand. That's how they tell. This is in the time of the Buddha, before watches. And so from that time until sun at midday, they can receive and eat food. But generally they don't have to, but there's sort of an etiquette to just have one meal. But, depending on the situation, you can have 2 meals or whatever during that time. But then you sort of fasting all afternoon, evening, until the next morning when you receive food. So that the sort of vibe that can exist is, I became a monastic because I saw the agitation, I saw the frustration, I saw the limitations of trying to find happiness through sense experience. Now, of course, monastics, they have sense experience. They have their little hut that they stay in maybe, or sit under a tree, or, sometimes people give them good food. But the point is they're cultivating a contentedness with what they're offered, as opposed to a lifestyle of pursuing what we want. So lay, like just as symbols, the sort of symbolic representation of a worldly person is a lay person whose objective is to get what makes me happy and to stay away from what makes me unhappy. And the objective of a monastic is, having seen the limitations of sensuality, I'll participate enough in sensuality to be healthy, but I'll spend the bulk of my time curious about a happiness that isn't based on sensuality. And then that should just beg the question for all of us, like, do we know anything about a happiness that's not based on sensuality? And so the purpose of the sit tonight, and I encourage you to really emphasize this for these weeks, because we can practice in a more open way all day long, meditate as you're doing your life, aware of what's ever predominant, and just the exposure to the diversity of our experience. But in the sit, I'd really encourage you to practice retreating from sensuality. The way we do that is we decide that we'll pay attention to one aspect of sensuality and not pay attention to all the other aspects of sensuality. You can choose which aspect you're going to pay attention to. It could be just, sometimes people use simple touch points, like where their hands are touching their legs. Or they'll use a couple so the mind doesn't get so bored. They'll feel their hands touching, and maybe feel the sits bones touching, and then maybe feel the lips touching, and then the hands, the sits bones, and the lips. And that's all. And they turn away from, like the mind, of course, will still have the impulse to notice a sight or to hear a sound. And we're not afraid of those distractions or interruptions. It's more about cultivating an interest in the chosen meditation object. And as I try to suggest in the guided instructions, when the mind is responsive to its request, honey, just pay attention to this. Can you keep this in mind? Just go for it. You don't need to know why. Just do it. It's not harmful. Just tracking the breath coming in, tracking the breath going out. But at some point, that seclusion, the relative simplicity, the relative absence of the mind noticing other sense experiences and having reactions to them, there arises a sense of calm, tranquility, a lightness of joy, an ease of heart, ease of well-being, a wholeness. And we want to start to notice now this pleasure of seclusion is relatively subtle. When we eat a bag of Doritos, that's a pretty gross, intense experience. Gross not in a negative sense, but it's like strong. Or maybe it's negative for some of us. But yeah, Cheetos, someone was just, Alice was just saying that, yeah, I think it was Cheetos that she, anyway, another story. So, but when we're learning, and let's call it an unworldly, a non-sensual pleasure, because the pleasure we're starting to sense is the mind not so agitated by sensuality, but it's actually pleasurable. But its cause is more about what's not there than what is there. When we get snuggled in our bed and we've got our music on, or Wynn and I have a salt lamp. Some of you have seen those. It creates a nice little glow in the room, and hear our cat snoring over there, and, we got our nice sheets that we like, and a nice blanket, and it's big windows looking at a nice cedar tree. So it's, over the years we've made a really pleasant spot. But then we're dependent on it. Like if there's a stain on something, or there's a leak, or the cat vomits, or, whatever, then it's like, and even before those bad things happen, when we have nice sense experience, even though we're not aware that we're afraid of losing what we like, that fear of losing what we like is there, even when we're not aware of it. Like, you may not be aware of the fear of death, but that doesn't mean it isn't doing its thing here and now in the space of the body and mind, heart. That anxiety, just because it isn't on the surface and awareness isn't aware of it, is there. So one of the things we notice when we are with the breath and we get some continuity with the breath, or whatever your chosen meditation object is, we start to experience directly a kind of good feeling, a well-being that isn't dependent on my bedroom being really nice, or my cat being cute, or having good food to eat. And that's, like, I think it's useful to call it a non-worldly, otherworldly, unworldly, these are, words we use, non-sensual happiness. The happiness of non-attachment, or the happiness of non-dependence. Like, I could do that, but I don't have to do that. There's some real freedom in that. And that's one of the things we're going to be exploring, because the opening question for us to explore these 4 weeks is, everybody talks about happiness, and now it's kind of like an industry. I'll send out the link for an article written by Musang, somebody I know, and he was one of the scholars at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. It's an important organization in our lineage. Although they have teachings from all the different Buddhist schools, it was started by IMS people, and it's on the same campus there in Massachusetts. It's really a great place. They do really nice programs, both online and in person. And Musang was there for decades. He just recently retired. And he has a nice article about the pursuit of happiness and how it's kind of become an industry and has sucked in a lot of Buddhism in the West. Has sort of gotten caught up in this happiness industry, which is sort of not in line with the way the Buddha taught, because it's not that there isn't real happiness. I mean, this is why, because there is this real sensual happiness, that's why it's confusing. But it's fundamentally limited. That's what we have to see. It is nice. I mean, hopefully everyone here, online, in the room, we hopefully can bring to mind times in our life where the sense experience was really satisfying. Making the distinction between attachment and union. And this is the thing, like the breath is sensual, or even all of us here, those of you online, those of us in the room, just that nice community feeling, like feeling, hey, we're here together, trying to understand our heart and mind better. And there's a good feeling. And so which of that is sensual and what of that is non-sensual? And so it's really about, like, we often use sensual experience to open to non-sensual experience. That's the whole spiritual path, like beautiful ritual or singing, drumming, dancing together, right? These are common human activities, and it's a powerfully sensual experience, right? Sound, sight, sometimes, incense, sage. I mean, it's like all the senses get engaged. That's good ritual does that, right? It really is compelling. It brings us in, it rivets the mind to the present moment because it's so interesting. The sensual experience is so interesting. But then something happens, which is, it's precisely because the mind is really present, then something else is known that's there but is often missed, and that's that unification and just the nature of the mind itself. And that's really the transition, where we're either going to use sensuality to feed craving and attachment, endless rounds, what we call samsara, or we're going to use sensuality to get to know something beyond sensuality, let's say. So, and that's, I didn't mention this, but that's the third alternative. Like I said, well, we either think sensuality is here to make me happy, or we think sensuality is here to torture me, to beat me up, spit me out. But the third is, sensuality is here, it's to be used as a teacher. Like how to creatively relate to sensuality, to learn about, to wake up to what isn't being seen. Yeah. And that's where ritual and meditation come in, right? If they're designed right, they create the conditions to learn about the nature of the heart and mind, not just to indulge in the nice, beautiful ritual, right? It's to go beyond the smells, the rhythms of the drumming, the beautiful chanting, the, whatever's going on. That's just to break the spell. Like, I'm worried about my to-do list and wondering if that person's attracted to me, and we got all those things. And then, the priestesses and the people running the ceremony, they pull out all the stops and they create something of real beauty, and we let go of the more gross end of sensuality, which is, does that person like me, and is that person going to beat me up, and what are they cooking in the kitchen, and we're sort of spellbound by the beauty of the ritual, and it starts to unify the mind. And because the mind isn't distracted, the ritual is holding the attention, right? And it's a beautiful sensual experience. It holds, it captures the attention. And if the right invitations are given, like the meaning of the ritual, what the people are saying, the purpose of the ritual, is to then use the power of that unification, the gathering of the energies of the mind and heart, to see what hasn't been seen. And that's the deal. And so how can we do that in our life? Like, as lay people, it's really appropriate for us to, because we're going to engage in sensuality anyway. So instead of this endless pursuit to have more kitchen gadgets or whatever our thing is, we all have a thing. Some of it's, having the latest technology. It's like, we always laugh at some people who collect things like, is it in North Dakota or Minnesota, the person with the biggest ball of twine? Oh, maybe it's Iowa. I forget where it is. It's somewhere in the Midwest. Guinness Book of Records, these sort of silly things. But we have our own version of it. The things that are in the cupboard or in the closet that we just can't get rid of because I might need it or whatever it is. And the thing is, it really entraps the mind. And it can even be traveling, or learning new things. Going on more Buddhist retreats can be somebody's addiction to sensuality. Kind of collecting teachers. Oh, I know that teacher. Oh, I know that. There are people like that. It's like, who's the new hot teacher? Okay, gonna learn about what they have to say, listen to their talks, maybe go on a retreat with them, be one of their students. Oh, this person's hot now. Okay, we'll go there. So there's any number of ways, and there's always that split, like, am I using sensuality to make me happy, always feeling betrayed, thinking it's really out to get me, because it doesn't make me happy, and it's so frustrating, it's a real betrayal. Like, how many relationships? Each time we get into new, it's like, come on, the others didn't do it, but you got to make me happy, So the alternative is like, we still have to use sensuality, but how can I use sensuality to go beyond it? And it's not like we're going beyond sensuality to leave it behind. We just the heart needs the big picture. And the picture we have, the picture we know well is, I'm just a beast trying to be happy and safe in a sensual world and not finding that I can do it. I find it a setup over and over again. And it's because it's not that there's a problem with sensuality. The problem is that we're not seeing the whole picture. That's that story I often tell from the suttas, where there's a layperson discussing the Buddhist teaching with some monks after their main meal, late morning, when they would usually talk practice together before they'd go off to their own little huts or camps to practice in the afternoon and evening. They'd kind of swap notes and learn from each other. And they were discussing, like, is the reason we suffer that we're sensitive? So if we just weren't so sensitive, then there wouldn't be so much suffering. And then the other half were arguing, no, it's not that we're sensitive, it's that we don't have the right experiences to be sensitive to. We need better sense experiences than what we have. Better food, better campsites, better robes, whatever. And so they were arguing, and this layperson comes, and he was pretty respected as someone who really understood the Buddhist teachings, and they asked him for his opinion. And he said, it's not because of the sensitivity, and it's not because of the sense experience. It's because something happens when there's a sensitive heart having a sense experience, seeing a sight, having a taste, hearing a sound, thinking a thought. Something arises in conjunction with sensitivity connecting with the sense experience. And that's called attachment, right? That grasping, that attachment, that sense of a somebody trying to extract something from sensuality. That can go away. So this is another homework for us this week is, in just ordinary ways, whether you're walking from your car to wherever you're going, or you're having a meal, or you're hanging out with a friend, or whatever it is, you're petting your dog. But plant the seed now, because you want to remember. And then just see, like, can I be intimate with the sensuality, unified, like all there, 100%, but not trying to get anything from the sense experience, not trying to feed on it, extract anything from it. And that's just interesting. Like, I notice, like, when I'm chewing food, for example, and it's, presumably it's pleasant, but do we need the sense of somebody indulging or needing the pleasure of the taste? Or can there just be the intimacy, like the mind can be really unified around the taste? This is from a Zen teacher, Roshi Nancy Baker. She wrote, "The odd thing about pleasure is that instead of fully enjoying what is here, being able to be fully present with it, we are busy looking for more. We miss the true depth of pleasure by being intoxicated with the possibility of more." Or that, it's the classic would be we're eating something we really like and we're wondering if there's going to be seconds. We're not really in the experience. Or another example of this, it's just so silly, but it's so true for us. Finally we get on a vacation. It's great. And we're thinking about I got to do this more, right? We're not really there. Or we finally get on a Buddhist meditation retreat, and we're planning future Buddhist meditation retreats. All this sort of stuff. And it's because there's an idea of somebody who's dependent on sensuality and is trying to get something, so I'll be saved. And just that, going back to that point about comfort, absolutely. Like, you wouldn't want to give this teaching people who are being abused or being taken advantage of and who don't have comfort. They need comfort. But so the whole point is first, like, do whatever we can to have a comfortable sensual existence, because it's only then when we are curious about the limitations, like, it didn't really make me happy. It's a lot better than being uncomfortable, no doubt. But I'm still agitated. I have the agitation of being dependent on my comfort. And I'm in a world that is uncertain, so my comfort isn't certain. I worked hard to get it, and I can't depend on it. And I'll send out a sutta that just, the Buddha talks about, well, what are the drawbacks of sensuality? And one of the things he says, just checking the time there. I'll go through this. Now, what practitioner is the allure of gratification? So he always talks about, what do you get from sense experience? What are the drawbacks? And what's the escape? So the allure is sort of what you would think, right? There are experiences from all of our senses that are agreeable, pleasing, charming, endearing, fostering desire, enticing, right? And there's joy that you get from that. And the Buddha would say, he did say, in terms of that experience of pleasure, nobody's experienced it as much as me. More than me. Meaning, like, I really paid attention to pleasant sights, pleasant sounds, pleasant touches, pleasant tastes, pleasant smells, pleasant thoughts. I really paid attention. I really know that experience. I wasn't afraid of it. And then the drawbacks. He says, I've paid attention to drawbacks. And what are the drawbacks of sensuality? There is the case on the account of an occupation by which a person makes a living, whether checking or accounting, calculating, plowing, trading, cattle tending, archery, soldier, or whatever the occupation may be, One faces cold, faces heat, being harassed by mosquitoes and flies, wind and sun, creepy things, dying from hunger and thirst. That's a drawback. And then there's all the insecurity, right? That you you work hard, but you don't gain any wealth from it. The efforts are fruitless. That's a drawback. Or let's say you gain a lot of wealth, then you have to protect it. Governments might want to tax it away, or people might want to steal it. And he goes on about all the quarrels that happen around possessions. Like the war in Ukraine. It's just like people thinking, you're part of us. You don't get to be independent, And it's all about this possessiveness and about what I think I need to feel secure. And we're in that world. It's a competitive world. I sometimes mention when I was practicing as a monk in Burma, the dogs in the monastery were in heat. And the way the meditation hall was a big building, but it was all screened. There was no wall. There were boards holding the screens together. So the dogs would be, you'd sit on a platform right next to the screens because it was so hot. And the dogs were, 10 feet away, fighting to, fornicate with the female dogs. And it was just, they'd be so vicious with each other. And, our mind, heart, bodies are conditioned not so differently than these other mammals. And this is the world of sensuality. And we're not being afraid of it or rejecting it doesn't work. Remember, that was the real turning point for the Buddha when he realized that ascetic practices wasn't the way. And we're looking for a way to be a sensual being, because that's what we are. We're a sensual being. So how are we going to do this? So the first thing we need to do is we need to feel safe. But we don't want to wrongly think that safety will do it. And we know people who will have that relative safety. They're wealthy enough, they have enough friends, but they're not happy in a lasting or a trustworthy way, right? And if they are, or if you are, then you're okay. And the question is to be curious about it. Is there some dependence on something that's not dependable? Because as long as I feel that way all the time, I really, Wynn and I mean, it's modest, but we have a really comfortable home. And I think appropriately, I fear my attachment to my comfort. And I got a car. I used to have a car that it was always problematic. The battery was always going out on it. So finally I got another car, and it's completely, right now, trustworthy. Until it isn't, but right now. And I feel that, I think appropriate, I really like having a car that starts when you turn the key. And it's not fancy, but it really works. And I really like that. And, to live close to the co-op and be able to get good food. I really like that. But I can't count on it always being that way. So what are we going to do about that realization when we have enough comfort, not perfect comfort, but enough safety, not perfect, but enough? What are we going to do? What do we do about the fact that it's not certain, that it's not dependable? And any idea I have of it needing to be dependable and needing to be certain is suffering here and now for me. Well, what happens if Wynn leaves? Or what happens if our cat gets hit by a car like our other cat did? Or what happens if I get sick? So for homework this week, just like I mentioned a few things, but just to break down your experience, whenever you're doing something I'm eating a meal, okay. What's the pleasure of this meal? Like, just honestly, I just want to be really wholly present with the pleasure of this. The Buddha suggests that there's some drawbacks. What's the drawback of this? Don't believe that the drawbacks, check. What are the drawbacks? Is there a way for my heart to be really intimate with the sense pleasure or the sense experience, but not dependent? So that's the third thing, the escape. That just means we're a sensual being having sensual experiences, but we've escaped the dependence. So what does that look like? To be in love with another human being, to have a nice relationship with another human being, a good friendship, but not dependent on it. Knowing that it can come and go, and making peace with whatever fear that is. Okay, that car. It's like Ajahn Chah, the well-known Thai teacher. He talked about having, someone gave him a really nice teacup, which was a little unusual for a monk to have a nice teacup. And somebody, kind of asked him about it because it was a little out of place. And he says, I'm always imagining it's already broken. Right? So that's the thing. It's like, okay. We can have a relationship with a partner, let's say, or we can raise kids, or we can have a nice this or a nice that. Because it's what arises in conjunction with a sense experience and a heart that's sensitive. Is there any attachment? Is there any dependence? Is there any suffering? Is there any drawback? That's what we're interested in. How to be a sensual being, but clean, no residual, no suffering. That's it. And the thing is, we don't know, if we have a lot of good fortune, we may not know if there's attachment. How are we going to discern if there's attachment to our sense experiences and our sense pleasures? Oh, I could have lunch today. I've got all this great food. I wonder what happens if I just don't eat lunch. I mean, that would be so shocking for us to do that, even in a playful way. I'm just going to skip lunch. I'm pretty sure I won't die. And just see that part of the mind's condition just freak out. What do you mean you're not going to have lunch? It's right there. It's your food, and you're not going to eat it? And it's a little bit like that when we sit in meditation. It's like you feel a little cramp or something, and you're sitting alone, let's say at home. You could move. No one's going to know. What's the problem? It's not wrong to move when you're meditating, but just to hold still, like to renounce that dependence on that. Or you're a little cold. You could put a sweater on, but you don't. And remember, the point isn't to be an ascetic where you think having nice sense experience is dangerous. Because that's a real element in all the spiritual traditions, that element. I mean, think of the sun dance and the indigenous people here in this world, and the Christians who and it gets to be weird. A lot of these sort of ascetic practices. And what the Buddha came to was simplicity. Like, health is good, a certain degree of comfort is good, but there needs to be sort of a understanding that it's limited. So really take up that study of, okay, what's the gratification here? What is the actual plus that the heart's receiving? Is there anything here? What, if any, agitation, tension? What's the drawback? What kind of seeds are getting planted that are tight? And how might I be the person eating this meal or watching this TV show without any thing left over, any negative seed, any negative tendency? It's like you shut it off, and there are former episodes that you've already paid for, but you choose not to watch it, right? And what's that feeling like? It's like a little death. The person that wants to watch it has to die, right? Because the person that thinks you should go to bed has the microphone or has, the power and say, no, you're going to bed. And so that's the drawback, is like when we have something really nice, we don't want it to end. And we often spoil our nice experiences because we don't want them to end. We don't know how to let it end. And you know how that is, like with friendships, and you do something nice, and how to bring it to an end, like some gathering or some event that you did together, and just how to, because often what we do is we rerun it until we really don't want it, it's not pleasant anymore. Same with food, right? It's like, we don't stop eating the ice cream when it's still delicious. I mean, maybe we do if we're with other people, but when we're alone, we stop eating it, a lot of us, when it's no longer pleasant, right? We've sort of kept trying to get as much pleasantness out of it, and now, because the stomach is so full or we're numb from the sweetness or whatever, it's just not pleasant anymore. And to really see that tendency in the mind. And maybe you're one of those really disciplined people, where you can just have a little taste and put it away. But there's tension in that too. It's sort of like, I know it's there for me and it's mine. And just in case I'm going to put my name on it, and I'll mention to the people I live with, by the way, that's mine, and I'm going back for it. Just because I'm not a pig like you and eat it all at once, I'm going back for that, right? So even that is tight. And it's just interesting for us to explore these weeks, like, how can I have some nice things in my life without being tight about it, without it being the cause for suffering? And here's the other thing that we often don't think about is so much of our pleasantness that we can experience, nice clothes, built on the backs of slavery and, genocide of the indigenous people, and so many oppressive systems that allows us to afford the pants that I buy because people aren't getting paid a fair wage, or living in polluted areas because of the things that they're making. So a lot of our comforts come at a cost, certainly to the planet and often to other people. And so that kind of even interrupts the ordinary pleasure of having nice stuff, is knowing, Wynn and I just paid like $140 for this company that guarantees the recycle plastic bags, and I think it's Ridwell or something like that. Maybe some of you have heard of it. We're just starting it, we're just getting to know it, just to kind of, so we're not contributing to so much plastic and other waste in our landfills, in our lakes and stuff. But when we consider the cost of our comfort, it takes away some of the comfort, doesn't it? Like, oh, these people are suffering, and it's related to me being comfortable is the fact of other people being uncomfortable in little and not so little ways. And then it really makes us wonder, like, so what do we do with this sensual life? What is our relationship to sensuality? Rejecting it is a heavy suffering trip. And the Buddha tried it, and people try it, and maybe we've all tried it to some degree. For 8 years in my 20s and very early 30s, I didn't date, I didn't have sexual relations with other people. And it was just like I was really, didn't want to be confused and wanted to do my spiritual practices. But it was sort of this fear, partly based on this fear of complications. It wasn't that I wasn't a sexual being and didn't have sexual attraction. I was just choosing not to listen to it, or not with other people at least. And it just got unhealthy, I think. And luckily, my partner showed up, but it's not that that's perfect, but it was kind of a turning. I mean, that the relationship is perfect. I mean, I think it's a good relationship, but it's still imperfect. But what is really true for me is this ideal, this ideal that, I don't need this. I don't need to listen to this desire or this impulse in my heart to be in a partnership or to have sexual relations with another human being. And just because it isn't about the sense experience, and it isn't about being sensitive, it's really seeing what arises in conjunction, that attachment, the dependence on sensuality. So in little ways, we can just experiment, having a meal without attachment, without dependence. And you can just like little playful things. You take a spoon, you put the spoon of your soup or whatever, you put the spoon down, and you wait until you see in your heart the desire for the next spoon, the need. There's a sense of a me who needs another spoon of this. It just helps us be more honest about our relationship to the soup. And can we make peace with that subtle, unpleasant feeling of like not eating it as fast as I want? Really make peace with that. And only when you make peace with that feeling of wanting, but just really, okay, wanting feels like this. Then let yourself, because you don't want to put more food in your mouth because you don't want to feel what it feels like to not be putting food in your mouth. So if you just take a moment and make peace with the feeling of wanting, like I could be with this. I don't have to because I have food, but if I had to, I could just, how do I know? Well, I'll be with it for 15 seconds and I'll really relax with it and I'll really feel it and I'll demonstrate to myself I can be with this feeling. Or your favorite show's on and you wait 10 minutes, you just sit there. It will feel like it's going to kill you. I mean, it's sort of funny how intense that can be. Or you're really cold and you don't turn the heat up for a little bit. Or you're really hot and you don't take the sweater off for a little bit. And then you get to know how sensuality runs the show, like that attachment. It's not personal, but it really drives things. So we're almost out of time. I just want to mention for anybody who's new to the Buddhist studies that there is an expectation that next week, for the last 15 minutes, 20 to 15 minutes, you will join into the small groups and you will share some of what you're learning, because you're going to be reflecting both when you formally meditate at home, but also all day long. Because especially with this course on sensuality, it's like all day long we're having sensual experiences. Notice the pleasure, notice the drawback of attachment, the suffering, the agitation of attachment, and experiment with what would be the escape or the release, like being a sensual person, having sensual experiences, but no burden. What would that look like? And we can move a little closer to that, like a little cleaner, a moment where we're having a sensual experience, but very little dependence, very little attachment. Someone offers you your favorite chocolates, and you really make peace with the idea of not having it. And maybe for the first hour of hanging out with them, you don't eat one, And then when you really feel like, I'm okay not eating that chocolate, then let yourself have some chocolate. See if you could just have one or two pieces, And it's just this kind of exploration. And then we'll come back next week. I'll talk more for the first, we'll have a guided meditation as we often do. I'll talk a little bit, but we'll save that 15 or 20 minutes for groups of 3, both for those of you here in the room, and Dave will be here, to help us divide up the people online for that. And I sent out one article by Tanasaro, And I'll send out some more articles that you can, for those of you who'd like to do some study, it's highly recommended if you have some time to do that. Probably more, I should say, but I see that we're out of time. Glad that people could be here tonight. Looking forward to doing this work together. There's so much to learn around our relationship to our sense experiences. So have a good week of practice, and I'll see you next Monday night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark. Bye, everyone.